In 2021, modern Yakuza fans have the luxury to enjoy all of the mainline games in several ways. However, at its lowest point, following up on two PS2 titles that were considered flops in the West, the higher-ups at Sega gave Yakuza 3's localization a tight budget and not a lot of time. It was either the game never came out overseas, or content had to be cut, and when it came to cutting content, the aspects of the game that they believed wouldn't appeal to the larger Western audience were chosen first. This mistake would be the pivot point to how the localizations of these games were approached. Today we'll be looking at Yakuza 3, 4, and 5, three PS3 titles that have been remastered for PS4, Xbox One, and PC, so we'll be looking at everything we can cover that has changed in terms of localization, to content, quality of life changes, what was added and what was lost, and performance among the various consoles. So to preface this video, 90% of what I'm going to talk about with these changes outside of performance refers to side content. The main stories and chapters only differ in translation, and combat is only affected by performance differences. However, these games are known for their side content, so some players will care more about these differences than others. In the Western release of Yakuza 3, shogi, mahjong, hostess management, cabaret clubs, and massage parlors were cut, along with any sub-stories and trophies associated with them. You can still take the hostesses out on dates, but the dates are abridged. One of the hostesses was also absent from the English version with no replacement. You can't read up on the hostesses in-game at the MEB either, and any leftover items associated with the hostesses are effectively useless. Answer X Answer, a Japanese trivia game, was also cut. Answer X Answer asks the player about topics such as Japanese culture, history, pop culture, sports, and cooking. It's really a game intended for folks that live in Japan. The original release of Yakuza 3 had a total of 123 sub-stories, while the Western release had 101 sub-stories. All 22 sub-stories that were cut will be shown on screen right here, and any licensed music ended up being replaced as Sega didn't get the rights to use the songs overseas. If you've started the series at 0, then you'll find the PS3 version's names are inconsistent and might make the game confusing at times. Kiryu is referred to Kazuma, Kazama is Fuma, Majima says Kazi instead of Kiryu-chan. Various location names will differ, things like that. And then we've got the DLC. In the US, pre-ordering would get you additional New Game Plus activities, more of Haruka's requests, 2-player modes for pool, darts, bowling, and golf, and bonus costumes. In the EU, pre-ordering got you the costumes and the 2-player games. As for the rest of that DLC, you had to buy the premium edition of the game, which also came with a 31-track soundtrack and a piece of software that served as a character guide. Japan also got a 2-player mode for Answer X Answer and additional questions. It's a series tradition to receive items if you have save data for other RGG titles. Though nothing in the US predates Yakuza 3 on PS3, Japan had Kenzan, so save data for that would get you a bonus. So not only did Yakuza 3 fail to appeal to a larger audience, but these cuts upset Western fans. So following on this whole mess, Sega issued an apology and made a commitment to improve. So how'd they do? Well, Yakuza 4 was at a great risk of never coming to the West since it depended on the success of 3. Despite that, there were only 2 changes in the localization of Yakuza 4. Licensed music was replaced, and the Answer X Answer minigame was cut once again. DLC-wise, in the UK and Australia, you had to buy a specific edition of the game to get the DLC, but meanwhile in the US, the DLC came with new physical copies. Meanwhile, Sega said that they didn't have any plans to localize Yakuza 5 until 2014, when they announced that it'd be out digitally only on PSN next year. So despite that caveat, everything made it in, and additionally, all DLC was included from the get-go. And now years later, we come to the remastered collection of all 3 of these games. So to get it out of the way, all content is uniform between every region version of these remasters. So when I tell you you can no longer browse magazines in 3 and 4, though you still can in 5, you can't browse them in Japanese either. Now there was one magazine that you could buy in 3 and 4 known as Tokyo Ishukan, which unlocked hidden menu items at restaurants, but in the remaster, those items are unlocked by default. Synopsis cutscenes that use the PS2 graphics of Yakuza 1 and 2 that catch you up on the previous games were removed. and the only missing minigame is Answer X Answer from 3 and 4. It is possible that even for those in Japan, the questions asked could have been dated, so it's not available there either. Not to mention that localizing the minigame for every language the games would be releasing in would be a massive undertaking. Licensing deals expired for all of the licensed music overseas, as well as for the theme of Don Quixote, which was removed in a patch. Other expired licensing deals also include the likenesses of 7 of the hostesses in Yakuza 3 and ads with Pepsi and Unilever, although the Pepsi logo is still present on the vending machines in 3, and all DLC for all 3 games is present in the remaster. One glaring issue gameplay-wise is that analog sticks are far more sensitive with directions in the remaster compared to the originals. This primarily affects how straight you run forward and how straight you can hit a cue ball and pull, which adds an unintended level of difficulty to pool. This level of sensitivity was fixed in the Xbox One versions of these games. You don't have to turn nearly as wide as you did in the originals, but going straight is much easier. This is probably the best possible balance of it. However, this issue was not fixed in the PC version that released at the same time, so the PS4 and PC versions suffer from this analog issue. Anyway, so sub-stories now show up on the map. There's optional English lyrics for karaoke that match so that they can be sang, and the localizations were overhauled. The names, presentation, localization conventions, honorifics, Kansai accents, and even the characterization of the cast are more consistent with the game since Zero.
だからここは兄貴しか収められねえと。
ちょっと待て。
はい？
さっきから聞いていると、俺のことを兄貴兄貴って何言ってるんだ。
だって、兄貴は兄貴じゃないですか。
お前は流動一家の若頭だろう。俺はお前の兄貴分でも何でもない。
まあ、その話はいいとして。
3 received the most drastic localization overhaul, while 4 and 5 were generally more mild re-edits. There were some references to memes in the updated localizations that were confirmed to have slipped in, but these have since been patched out. Now let's break things down game by game. Yakuza 3 has 119 sub-stories in total in the remaster, compared to the original Japanese release of 123, meaning that 4 sub-stories in total were removed from the remaster, one of those being for Answer X Answer. The other 3 that were cut featured a transphobic stereotype. Said character chases Kiryu down, and if you fail the chase, it's heavily implied that he is then sexually assaulted. These games don't shy away from topics like gender identity and are generally respectful with their approach, especially even within 3 itself during another sub-story. So these 3 sub-stories were out of character and out of place. One bug introduced in the remaster is when you're doing your climax attacks, this timer is supposed to be draining while you pick your move, but it's always empty in the remaster. The Tamashiro family crest that featured the rising sun motif was changed since the games were releasing in Korean and Chinese territories where it's seen as offensive. And while this doesn't have to do with the game itself, these remasters were all sold individually in Japan, so the cigarette on the cover of 3 was removed. Now with Yakuza 4 Remaster, the most significant change has been Tanimura. Tanimura, one of the 4 characters you play as in the game, was recasted for the remaster. His previous voice actor and face likeness retired from acting after allegations of drug use. So not only will you notice a difference in his face, but his dialogue as well.
警察ってのは嫌なやつが多いとこです。捕まったら無理やり自白させられてしまうかもしれませんよ。
警察ってのは嫌なやつが多いとこです。捕まったら無理やり自白させられてしまうかもしれませんよ。
Pachinko has seemingly been removed from the PC version as well. Same goes for Pachinko in the PC version of Yakuza 5. It's possible that Pachinko will be a free DLC just like it was in Yakuza Like a Dragon on Steam, though as of right now, there's been no statement by Sega regarding that Pachinko is even missing. And now we move on to Yakuza 5. Haruka's comedy minigame now has a visual indicator for timing, making this minigame much more bearable. Before you had to guess on the timing. This meter used for timing with a placeholder banana was originally a dev tool, and the localization team pitched the idea to retool it for the player. Now remember back a bit how I mentioned that all these games released physically in Japan, but elsewhere they all came together in one remaster collection. So what was cool is that the physical version of the remaster collection comes with a PS3 case for Yakuza 5, since the game did only release digitally here. So for those with a physical collection, this would complete it. And now we move on to the juggernaut of a topic that is the performance of these games. The original PS3 games, Yakuza 3, 4, and 5, all were around 720p and aimed for 30 FPS, though they are prone to dropping in frame rate and slowing down. Meanwhile, on PS4, you get 1080p at 60 FPS. Then on PS4 Pro, you get 1440p and 60 FPS. On Xbox One, both S and X are 1080p and 60 FPS. The PC versions have variable and arbitrary resolution support and either a 30 FPS or 60 FPS cap. No higher frame rates are supported, and that's why I want to save the frame rate talk for the end. In the meantime, these games use different models and textures between cutscene and gameplay, so we'll be doing comparisons between both in-game and cutscene graphics. We'll notice though that the PC versions of 3 and 4 support much higher resolution textures in both cutscenes and in-game compared to the consoles, but that's unfortunately not the case for 5. The PC ports were handled by QLock, who have a spotty history with their ports. Given how many they've been tasked with for over the last few years, I imagine their workload may be why, but regardless, there's a high number of players having performance issues with the PC versions, even if they run some other modern games just fine. This could be patched out later, but if you know what AVX means, yes, these games require it for now. Now, the frame rate caps are in place because these games have game logic tied to it. The original PS3 releases were 30 FPS, though some minigames actually worked at 60 FPS. So then, all versions of the remaster, that's 60 FPS, have some missed or unchecked issues regarding game logic tied to frame rate. Even some of the minigames that were already 60 FPS do too. Some issues were fixed, but others weren't. So let's look at some more prominent examples. Kiryu's quickstep in Yakuza 3 originally let you get behind an enemy and whiff punish him. However, in the PS4 remaster, Kiryu goes further, so there is a slight chance you could whiff your whiff punish, or you could circle back around in front of the enemy and get hit anyways. This was then corrected, albeit slightly overcorrected, in the PC and Xbox versions. And when the remaster of 3 originally released in Japan, Kiryu would move much faster than intended, and even more so when holding stuff. This was patched in Japan though, and was never an issue in the overseas version of the remaster. In Yakuza 5, there's a forklift chase that is unintentionally harder because of how much faster the forklift catches up to you. This issue persists through all versions of the remaster. Unfortunately, I can't tell you everything affected by this frame rate issue. I spent several days testing just the things I mentioned, and I'm not being paid to QA. You get the idea though, these oddities don't make the games completely unplayable, and some players may never notice depending on how you play these games anyway. So now back to covering the PC version. So bear in mind that thanks to the FPS caps, if you drop any frames, the game will slow down. So if you can't keep a consistent 60 FPS, you'll have to set it to 30. On the bright side, the PC version did add the ability to pause cutscenes before skipping them in 3 and 4. Also, saving on PC and Xbox is significantly faster compared to saving on PS4, basically instant by comparison. Though for those that save on PS4, this is probably something you're used to. And for those playing in ultra-wide resolutions, the sidebars can be disabled now. The PC version also offers button prompt icon options, controller remapping for everything besides the analog stick and pause, and total keyboard rebinding excluding start. The rebinding stuff excludes Yakuza 5 though. Yakuza 5 you can't remap a few things like designated control prompts and camera movement that's mapped to the mouse. You've also got render scale options, but I did notice that it caused this weird banding artifact specifically in Yakuza 4, so it's been disabled in all of that footage. Yakuza 5 also offers dynamic resolution change. You've got audio options, but you will hear sound effects randomly be loud or sometimes cut out when you turn the volume down in-game. So if you want to turn the game volume down but avoid those issues, you'll have to turn it down in Volume Mixer. And the last thing I want to mention is the mod support these games are going to get on PC. As of this video, mods already exist for increased performance in regards to CPU usage, and restoration mods for things such as music, Tanimura's actor, localization changes, and gameplay cutscene texture replacements. So if those things put you on the fence about the remasters, there you go. Now keep in mind that just like with any other videos I make, that at any time in the future some of this information may become outdated if or when any patches start to roll out. As of right now, a case could be made that since the Xbox version corrects the analog stick issue and has an adjusted quick step in 3, the remasters on Xbox offer the most polished experience. Visually, as you'd expect, the PC version takes the cake, assuming it works fine on your PC. However, some players will still prefer the original versions of the games due to maybe the frame rate issues, preference in localization, or having a soft spot for Tanimura's performance. So thanks everybody for watching, and thank you to the Yakuza modding community who I conversed with a bit and researched for several topics present in this video. You can support me via Patreon for future port reviews, or follow me on Twitter for updates in the future.